Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.
And you haven't seen them yet?
No. I only look once I'm with the person.
They weren't in any particular order, but let's just see how they come out.
Yeah, let's see. So where's your
bottom?
Rory?
Yeah. It has come out in an order, because I mentioned just before we started recording.
Yeah.
I found it interesting to myself. I didn't give too much angst towards what photos do I pick and how do I want to curate it or anything like that.
Well, if we wanted
but this was the one photo that I knew I wanted to pick before the other three.
Okay.
Use it by a distance. As soon as you talked about photos, I was like, this one.
Okay, we'll start with this. So
this was the one that came into my head first. And it's not necessarily this photo that it was taken at a particular time of day or a particular person.
Yeah.
It's more just the scene. So I really just went to Google and just said K2.
Okay.
So we got the mountain K2.
Okay.
But it's the most iconic. If you Google it...
this isn't the photo you made?
No, I just took it off the internet.
Okay.
But it's the most... If you Google K2, nearly every photo will be this aspect of the mountain.
Right.
From the base camp up on the Baltoro Glacier. There are some which I find a bit more dramatic. They're further down the glacier. And it just... And it's the ultimate mountain for me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's have to describe, it's a podcast about photographs. It's ridiculous. So basically it's a photograph made at the base camp. You can see a couple of tents, I guess, and a couple, in this sort of fluorescent orange or whatever at the bottom. There's no vegetation. So it's just exposed earth shot on a clear day, probably in the either a couple of hours into the afternoon or late morning. Because of the light direction and the shadows. You see the morning. You're a geography nerd, so of course you'll figure it out. I love the fact that whoever shot this used a polarizing filter, so the sky isn't light blue. It's this dark navy, super, it's at altitude. It's full on. K2. Tallest peak, second tallest in the world. The hardest.
Yeah, many people's books are hardest. I don't know, I'd use words like gnarly, just epic.
Yeah.
I think if a kid, without knowing of K2, say to a kid, draw a mountain, a snow-capped peak.
Yeah.
This is it. It's just
there you go.
Sheer pyramid of...
and I love that there's just the barest hint of a cloud, condensation.
Yeah, a little lenticular.
Just sitting at the peak. Okay, then the first question I have to ask you, and by the way, my questions aren't questions. I talk and then I say, what do you think? So in this case, it's a question.
Okay.
Why?
Most epic mountain. And although I'm not a mountaineer per se, or I didn't sort of grow up necessarily in mountains all the time, just wherever I go in the world, if there are hills or mountains, I find those places alluring, interesting. And as someone who's now basically making my living out of adventure tour guiding, mountains are where it's at. Right. I mean, I don't necessarily ever want to climb that thing, because I might die trying. I don't know. It would be a real privilege to go to Kashmir one day and see the thing. But most epic mountain, it's always captured my imagination.
Okay, so because you dropped that bomb, dropped that hint flag, you have a company that does, and that's how I met you, that does adventure tours. Sell it. What's it called?
Wild Hong Kong. Wow. So we don't necessarily get that wild with all the customers, as we just hinted on with the kids we took cycling. A lot of people struggling just to put one foot in front of the other, literally. But we try to challenge them within reason. But it's an adventure tour company. Started it 10 years or so ago now.
Amazing.
And it was born out of latter years at school, and then years after school, university, whatnot. I think discovering through those years that this is probably one of my main passions in life was outdoor adventuring, as opposed to my degree, which was in architecture. But
architecture, not geography.
Architecture. if I was ever to do a master's, something like cartography could be of interest, because as you've noticed when we were doing tours, I was a bit of a map geek. Yeah, I'm a geographer. That's because I think it's interesting with all the staff we have on the company. They all have different, not so much strengths or weaknesses as guides, but things that they find interesting. For example, you've met Tristan.
Yep.
He's my main guide who works for me full time. He's not so much a geographer, and he's a biologist, but I'd say it's the marine biology that interests him the most. He loves to do Hoi Ha is his favorite tour. It's this little cove in Hong Kong that has coral and good marine biodiversity, and he loves putting jellyfish out. I find it interesting, but I'm not that bothered. And to the same end, he's not an ornithologist. Yeah. He doesn't give a stuff about what birds or bushes are lurking about. But yeah, for me, my aspect is I'm a geographer. I love pointing out that's that hill, that's that island, this is how these rocks are formed, whatever it may be.
Right.
It's not specifically geology or just landscapes, maps, navigation. Yeah, I dig it. So that's something I try to push to the table when I'm with a guest on a tour.
Right. So what's the tallest elevation you'll take your guests here in Hong Kong?
As much as you can get. You can't even. The highest hill in Hong Kong, Tai Mo Shan, I think it's 954 meters, but you can't get to the top because there's a POA base. The road kind of gets to a gate for basketball courts. It's rather underwhelming. The hell is the top? So I don't even know what altitude that's at. Because Lantau Peak's 932 or 934. So that actually might still be the highest.
I think Tai Mo Shan is academically the highest, but the highest you can get to is probably Lantau.
And it's befitting because Lantau Peak is an epic...
Beautiful place.
I would say epic hill, but it's one of these hills that feels and looks like a big mountain.
Yep.
You put that next to mountains in other parts of the world as a little lump, but it is epic.
Yeah.
And it's got a... Because people sometimes will ask, what's a mountain? What's a hill? What's a mountain? It's different where you are in the world.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd say Lantau Peak goes in the mountain category.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever, or shall I say, how many people have you brought up Lantau who broke down crying?
Just the two.
Only
made two girls cry.
What?
On Lantau Peak.
How can I have beat your record? That doesn't make sense.
Were you with a group? How did you make your girls cry? I'm allowed to throw questions back at you, right?
One was a man, two were women, who just get to the top. There's that false peak. There's the first ridge that you kind of...
Are you going from the southern side?
Yeah, from the south.
Yeah.
And then, if you go straight up from the Big Buddha, it's just up. And
a lot of people find those stone steps to get to the ridge quite demoralizing.
Yeah. Well, but if you go from the saddle... It's usually when you crowd, you have all these mini peaks and you get to one of the false ones, usually there, somebody who's not used to walking, not used to hiking, whatever. Yeah, it's just their body. Just their body saying, I'm going to cry now.
The two times we've done it, we're both we ascended at night for sunrise. So it was a case of, as it gets light, they start to see what we've dragged them up, and then they freak out, cry, want to go back down. But this is out of hundreds of people.
Sure.
But it's one of the more wild tours we get to do.
It's a great one. Yeah, okay, so the image that you serve up is of K2, which is, as far as the world is concerned, arguably one of the most difficult peaks. What would you say has been your most difficult peak?
The hardest mountain I've ever climbed? Don't know. I think maybe some of the stuff we had to do at school when I was a teenager. A young teenager, 13. Not because the mountain itself was technical, just the experience of having to go up there was bloody miserable, and I wasn't wanting to do it. We had to go up. So the boarding school, I went to boarding school in Scotland for 10 years as a teenager. Okay. And the school has a very strong outdoor ethos. So every term there would be an exped, as we just abbreviate it from expedition to exped.
Mm-hmm.
Some were like a house expedition where it's quite a laugh. You're just going with all the different age groups in your house and you just do games and activities and goof about. But you would have your year 9, your year 10, your year 11, so on, annual exped. And it would be not in the winter, but usually in the shoulder season, in the autumn or the spring. If you've been to Scotland, it's still bloody wet and cold the whole time. It's not fun. And we'd be dragged up on a predetermined date. Invariably, the weather is
shite.
Dreek, as they say in Scotland.
Dreek.
Aye, it was dreek.
You can totally swear if you want
I
to.
can fucking swear, right? Because that's a large part of the Scottish accent if you're going to put it on. Yeah, it'll just be windy and wet and you're not having fun. Like, we don't do the exped to climb the mountain. We'll be on some 4-day plod, generally through valleys and peat bog. Your shoes are already wet and you got blisters, and then you have to go up the summit and it's just fog. There's nothing to see.
Yeah.
You're just like, what are we doing up here? You're
That's demoralizing. To climb up a mountain or a peak or whatever that you're in fog the whole time, you're just like, well, I have no frame of reference. I'm just rolling up.
They call it character building. I mean, maybe it's made later on has rubbed off on me. I'm not so sure sometimes because it kind of almost put me off a lot of outdoor pursuits as a teenager.
Well, hold on. I have to disagree because you did this shit. It's really awful. Character building, all that stuff.
It's cliche, but it's true.
But it did not put you off because what are you doing for a living?
Well, this would take me to my next point. Would be that it introduced me to the sphere of it, but in the short term, it did put me off. I mean, yeah, it did rub off on me, of course, but it was something don't want to give school too much credit for because I had to really discover it after school.
Right.
Doing adventures that I wanted to do, maybe when I wanted to do them.
For sure.
And that was the fun, not being sent off.
No.
I wasn't going to join the military.
Right.
Boarding school had definitely
right.
told me that was the path I didn't want to take. I enjoy a bit of freedom.
Right. No, I got that. So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.